Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don K. Preston, and with me this evening is my friend and partner on the program this evening, Daniel Rogers. This is week 3 of the absence of William Bell, who is in Ghana, Africa, yes, Ghana. And I'll be really honest, I haven't heard an awful lot from William since he made the trip. And of course, their telephone reception and there is. I did post a video on Facebook this morning, and I got notification from it. I immediately sent him a message in response to the video, but I haven't heard anything back from him. About all that I do know is that, and Daniel, I don't know if you've heard anything from William or not. Have you?
I haven't.
Daniel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah,
I
haven't heard it. No.
Yeah. Okay.
You were breaking up there for a second. Anyway, I'm not sure if.
Oh.
But you're fine now. I don't know if they could hear it. Or it was just me or what. But you're good now. So.
Okay. Very good. Well, anyway, as I was saying, I heard from William after he'd been over there for a little over a week that the gentleman, the minister from the Churches of Christ over there, evidently the largest Church of Christ in the area, in the city of Accra, had challenged him to a formal public debate, and of course William had accepted. And after he was over there for, like I said, about a week and a half, the gentleman started rescheduling the debate. And the very last that I had heard, he had rescheduled the debate twice. And so I sent William a text message. I sent him a Facebook message asking the status of the debate to give me an update on how things are going over there insofar as the ministry is concerned, and a lot of the things that they had planned to do while they were over there, and haven't heard from him. So I really honestly do not know how things are proceeding and progressing over there. I do know that they had an absolutely full schedule for William, going from city to city, village to village. They had an awful lot of very, very practical things to get set in place, what I call culture building. When he was over there the first couple of times, they had managed to raise enough money. They bought some sewing machines. They even bought a deep freezer to be used for storing fish, because Solomon Baidu, the minister from over there, is able to fish and to collect fish and to store them in a freezer and then to sell them and to make some money. And that type of activity is culture building, and it bodes extremely well for the future. Instead of people having absolutely nothing and no way to improve themselves, to improve their lot in life, by purchasing those sewing machines and teaching them how to make clothing and to build a future, by selling the clothing, selling the garments, etc., to make money, to support themselves, also to support other good works, to teach other people how to do the same thing. And I mean, that kind of thing is just incredibly wonderful. And there's an old saying, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for life. And that's the kind of culture building activity that William is involved in on this trip. And I've got to tell you, I'm extremely excited. I'm eager to hear what William has to say when he comes back and is back on air here on Two Guys in the Bible, here on Fulfilled Radio, to know of all of the activities that he's been involved in, more of those culture building activities, and the success in the evangelism that they are involved in while they're over there. So I don't know about you, Daniel, but that kind of culture building activity is the kind of activity that we have not seen enough of in regard to missionary activity.
That's right. And and when you look at the New Testament, especially Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, that's one thing that he focused on more, than doctrine and things like that, was reiterating time and time again, hey, when we were with you, we worked with our hands. We built tents. We showed you how to live, not just as Christians, but as humans. And I think, one of the saying that's up on our sign right now at the church building is, preach the gospel every day, sometimes use words. I think we get so caught up in the academic aspect of Christianity that we forget about the practical application and the importance of letting our light shine in that way. So.
Oh, I agree 100%. I have made the comment many, many times. And as someone that's been involved in polemics so much in my ministry and in the movement of covenant eschatology, I'm certainly one of those that has had a tendency to be involved in theological discussions and what have you. And yet, increasingly over the years, my wife and I have tried to find ways that we could share the blessings that the Lord has given us,
right.
The material blessings, that we can share with people that are in need. And I'm not going to go into any specific details because I don't want it to sound like I'm, patting myself on the back or giving myself any accolades. But we just simply feel that we've been blessed so much that when we encounter situations that touch our hearts, that we discover someone that is struggling, but they're working very, very hard. I will just simply share a very quick anecdote of what happened a couple of weeks ago. My wife and I were eating at a restaurant, and we noticed one of the young waitresses, very pretty young girl, but at every table that she was at, she just had the most bright and cheerful and professional attitude of being helpful, of being polite, being courteous, and what have you. And let's face it, you don't see enough of that. And, when you go to restaurants, I went into a parts store the other day and I told the young man behind the counter what I wanted and asked him to get it for me. He acted like I was insulting him by asking him to get the part for me. I paid for the part. He gave me my change and literally walked away. He didn't say, thank you for coming in. We appreciate your business. He didn't say, be sure to come back. He didn't say, is there anything else that we can do to help you? He literally just put the money in my hand, turned around, and walked off. So in contrast to that, Jan and I are in this restaurant, and we kept noticing this young woman. And Jan overheard her say that she had another job. I mean, this young woman is in her very, very early 20s, if she's that old. And we were both just struck by the fact that here is a young woman that's working two jobs. And so when she came back to our table, I just asked her, I said, I want to know something. I said, I want to know how many jobs you have. She said, well, I'm working at 2 right now. And I said, why? And she seemed a little bit surprised. And she said, well, because I have to. I've got to support my son, my baby, and because I'm going through a real bad divorce. I said, okay. And I said, what is your other job? And she told us, and it's not an easy job, I can tell you that. I know the outfit that she works for, and they will drain every ounce of energy that you have. And to make a long story short, Jan and I gave her a little bit of money, and she started crying. But we just felt like here's a young girl, a young woman that is going through an extremely difficult time in her life of a divorce. She has a child to support, and as anyone knows, if you work at a restaurant, unless you work at a very nice place, you're not going to make a lot of money.
Right.
And this is kind of a fast food restaurant, even though you go in and sit down, and it's not going to be a place that she's going to make an awful lot of tips. And so we tried to be generous with her. And like I said, she initially, when we tried to give it to her, she said, no. And I said, yes, you will take this. And so she did, and immediately started crying. But what you're saying there, and what we're talking about with William over there, putting the love of Christ to work in our life, of reaching out to people that are struggling, people that are doing the very best that they can. They don't have any way else to lift themselves up. To me, that's just a whole lot of letting Christ dwell in us and be manifested in the things that we do by touching the hearts and lives of other people.
That's right. One of the things that we were thinking of doing as a congregation, and we still have to work out the logistics, we're just in the very beginnings of this discussion, but is having a community garden. And we wanted to put up there on the sign, turning our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks.
Cool.
Yeah. It's just trying to find ways to take these wonderful truths that we've learned from Scripture and put them into use, not just as you're talking about, not just on the debate stand, but also in our communities and our day-to-day lives. So.
Well, and let's face it, that's exactly what they did in the first century.
That's right.
They went into the synagogues, and there they reasoned daily in wars of words, in the polemic arena, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. But they also reached out and they touched the lives of people where they were living, the poor. And, as James expressed it, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widow in their affliction and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Christ went everywhere. And everywhere he went, he taught great theological truths. But he also reached into the hearts and into the lives of people. He fed them. On how many different occasions? On at least 2 occasions that we know of, he fed thousands of people.
Right.
And I suspect, I don't know that we've got definitive proof of it or not, but I suspect that there were other occasions where he helped people in their need and their hunger that we're not even told about. After all, John tells us in John chapter 21 that many other works did Christ. And John said, I suppose that if they were all to be recorded, the world could not hold all of that which he did. So everywhere that he went, Scripture affirms he went about doing good. And so that I think is incumbent upon us as Christians. And it's easy for us as individuals, it's easy for us as a body of believers to basically sit back and to almost say, well, look, we got the truth. If you want it, come and get us, or come to us and we'll share it with you. And don't come to us telling us about your problems and your hurts and your pains, because we're not interested in that. We're interested in teaching you the truth. And there has to be a partnership between the two.
Well, Don, those people that are coming for help, they're probably just trying to take advantage of you. So, unless they start attending with you, why should you, pay attention to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I've got to tell you that in all of my years in local ministry, I had a tendency to get a little bit jaded and more than a little bit defensive, because you did see so many people that were doing nothing but trying to take advantage of Christian generosity, Christian compassion, to get money to go do whatever they wanted to. Right. And that's what they did. They they drove all around the country, going from church to church. And I actually came up with a really good way, as it turned out, a really good way to help determine whether or not somebody was in legitimate need and worthy of our help, or whether or not they were just freeloaders. I started when they would come to the building and they would say, and I must say this, and then we're going to get into the lesson here momentarily, but I must say that it always bothered me to look out my window, and here's a guy sitting in the car, and he sends his girlfriend or his wife in to do the begging. And I would ask the girl, "Where's your husband?" "Oh, well, he's in the car." "Well, he's too embarrassed. Pardon me, he's too embarrassed to come in." "Well, he needs to come in because I need to talk to him as well. I need to talk to both of you at the same time." "Well, he doesn't want to come in." I said, "Well, if he won't come in, then we're not going to help." But that's not the method that I came up with. What I developed is I started telling people, "Listen, we are very interested in helping you if you have a legitimate need, but the men who are in charge of that," and I always told them, "I don't have any money here at the building. We don't keep any money here at the building. And so the men who are in charge of that will be here this Sunday morning. So if you want to come to worship service, be a part of us for this Sunday morning, and they will be glad to talk to you after worship service." And I'll guarantee you, about 8 out of 10 of them would go, "Oh, you mean I got to go to church in order to get any help?" "Well, yes, sir." "Yes, ma'am."
That's one of the benefits of being
like
a preacher.
Were insulted.
That's one of the benefits of being a preacher for the Church of Christ, because they come to the office, during the week, and you're sitting in there studying or whatever, and they say, "Is the pastor here?" And you say, "Nope, we have two pastors, and they'll be here on Wednesday night." I'm just the lowly minister.
That's right. And they look at you like, "What?"
Yeah. Which I start off so young, and I still am young,
right.
So I can get away with that really well.
Yeah. Well, like I said, that method really, really worked well, because when you put it down to them, that really all they had to do is come to worship service. That's all they had to do. And if they were as destitute as they say, if they were as hungry as they say, if they were as needy as they claim to be, then how difficult is it to come and to sit through 1 hour of church? And then the men, because I'll guarantee you, in 99.9% of the cases of anyone who actually came to our worship service, through services, and talked to the men, they got groceries, or they got gas, or they got both. Now, we never gave money, period. Absolute rock bottom rule, no cash money ever. And when I told people that, they would very often say, "Oh, well, okay, thanks anyway, I'm going to leave." "Oh, you got to have cash, or you're not interested in our help?" "No." "Well, we'll feed you." "No, I'm not hungry." "Well, you just told me you hadn't eaten in 3 days." So, it's easy to get jaded.
We've done we've paid people's power bills for them. We just ask them, "What do you need the money for?" And we go off and we do whatever, But
that's exactly right. Well, it's so gratifying when you can help someone that is so clearly, obviously, and undeniably in need. And it's kind of like the young woman at the restaurant. She absolutely did not reach out to ask us for any help whatsoever. I mean, she turned us down initially, and yet the need was very clear. It was undeniable. And so, like I said, that was just very gratifying. It's humbling to be blessed to such an extent to be able to help people in that situation. And, it's not like we were able to give her $1,000 or anything like that, but we were able to give her enough that we knew that it was going to be a tremendous help to her. And so when we can do that as Christians, and when we can let people know that this is coming from a heart of compassion of Christ, then it can have an impact on people. And it can let them know that, hey, you know, there are some Christians out there that they really are living the life. They're not just talking, and they're not talking down to me, and they're not talking about me. They really honestly want to help me. What is there about this? Why are they doing this? What is there about what they believe that makes them do this? And that opens doors of opportunity.
Right.
So, anyway, all right, folks. And by the way, Daniel, thank you so much for filling in for me last Tuesday night. I can tell you, I was in no condition to do a program. Just a real brief synopsis of what I've been through. A week ago last Wednesday, I started feeling very bad. And on the next day, Thursday, I slept for 16 hours. And, I mean, I was just completely, totally out of it. And on Friday, I got up. I was feeling somewhat better. I wasn't feeling good, but I was feeling somewhat better. And we had a trip planned to Arkansas to visit the grandkids. And so we went ahead and went. But by Friday night, I was feeling terrible again. By Saturday morning, I was feeling absolutely awful. And so we went to an urgent care center. And by the way, by Saturday morning, I was also running almost 102 degrees of fever. And, of course, we were just scared to death that it was COVID. And so we go to an urgent care center that was about a mile from our hotel. And they took urine sample, and then they did the COVID test. And the doctor came in and said, well, Mr. Preston, you have a raging UTI. And she said, but in regard to the COVID, she said, I'm not real sure what the results are. She said, I'm not certain what it is that I'm seeing there. So as of this moment, you are officially on a 3 to 5 day COVID quarantine. Not 14, not 10, 3 to 5. And I said, well, we were here to visit our grandkids. And she said, absolutely not. She said, you're isolated. And I said, well, in that case, my wife and I are going to go back to the hotel. We're going to pack our duds, and we're going back to Ardmore, Oklahoma, where we live, so that I can hit the couch again. And she said, well, as long as you don't socialize, as long as you don't stop and be around anybody on your way, then I'm going to permit that. Well, on Tuesday evening, after we had gotten back on Saturday night, the phone rang at almost 9 o'clock at night. And it's the doctor from Arkansas saying, Mr. Preston said, we just got the full culture back on your UTI and said the antibiotic that we gave you is not going to knock that. The strain of bacteria that you have is extremely resistant to the antibiotic that we have given you. And she said, I'm going to call your pharmacist right now. And it is imperative, this is the word that she used, imperative that you go to the pharmacy right now and you start taking this new antibiotic tonight. And I said, my pharmacy is closed. Oh. She goes, well, in that case, give me their number. I will fax them. I will leave a voice message. And I want you sitting there when they open up in the morning, because it's imperative you get on this other antibiotic immediately. Well, needless to say, it's unusual for a doctor to call at 9 o'clock at night. And then the urgency of her message was rather troubling. And I'll try to cut this story short. I went to my urologist. He informed me, because he had been sent the records from Arkansas, that the infection that I had was actually staph infection. And needless to say, that's kind of scary stuff. But I'm now clear of that. But he said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to get you in for a CAT scan. And my wife used to work at the hospital, and she said, well, good luck with that. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to get a CAT scan in. And he goes, no, you don't understand. I'm going to call this in as an emergency. And we're going, seriously? And we left. We were on our way back home when the hospital here in Ardmore called and said, Mr. Preston, can you come in now for a CAT scan? And we're like, holy cow, he did. He put that in as an emergency. So we got to the hospital. I walked into the testing center and told them who I was, and they said, come with me. And I mean, they walked me right past 6 or 7 other people waiting and ran a CAT scan. So I go back in the morning to get the results of the CAT scan. They already are working on a scope of my bladder because the doctor said sometimes what you are experiencing is caused by kidney stone that is causing blockage, that is causing the infection that you've got. So he said, we've absolutely got to find out through the CAT scan, through the scope, what's going on with you. And he said, when we do the scope, if we can see those kidney stones, then we'll just do the lithotripsy and we'll get rid of them. And this was funny. He goes, Mr. Preston, do you have a history of kidney stones? I said, well, if you count having 13 kidney stones, a history, yeah, I've got a history of kidney stones. And he was like, good grief, I had no idea you've had that many kidney stones. But anyway, that's the saga that I have been through over the last week and a half. But as I mentioned, last Tuesday night, I was absolutely not in any shape. My mental acuity was probably about 20% of normal. I mean, I would just kind of sit and
Did we lose you?
Hello?
There you are. You cut out. You cut out there for about 5 seconds. You're still gone. Hello? Hello, hello, hello? Hello, hello? I don't know if it's me or him. Testing. Well, folks, I don't have access to the Blog Talk Radio dashboard, and so I don't know if I'm still able to be heard or what. So I really can't tell you. If you want to, actually, if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, if you can go to YouTube and go type in Daniel Rogers Church of Christ, if you could go there and tell me in the chat if you can hear me on Blog Talk Radio, that would be very helpful for me. Because Don just sent me a message. He's trying to get reconnected, but I don't know if you can even hear me, because I don't know how, if I'm connected through his phone or through what. So I need some direction here. If you can hear my squeaky chair, please go to my YouTube page and tell me what's going on. If you can't hear me, then you can't come and tell me what's going on, and so I guess we're just sitting ducks until something comes up. Because I'm not going to go and proceed with any sort of lesson until Don gets back. It doesn't make any sense to do that, since I don't know whether or not I'm heard. Well, at least my YouTube stream's still working, so I know I'm good on this side. I just know that Don connects through Blog Talk Radio, and I don't know if I'm through him or if I'm independent of him and can still be heard. So it's hard for me to tell. Let me think actually. I bet I can. Let's see. Blog Talk Radio. On air. Here we go. Let's see if I can hear myself. Mute. Might need to mute my... Testing, hello? Need to mute my... Okay, I can hear myself through Blog Talk Radio, so let me, hang on a second here. Let me get this figured out. Sorry, folks. Okay, I know Blog Talk Radio can hear me, so that's good. Let me get Don back in here now if I can. I'm not sure if it'll let me sign in. It's not letting him connect. See if I can remember the password and all this. Dashboard. Oh man, I don't know what to do. This is a bit awkward here. Hang on just a second. I'm trying to get this figured out. Okay, let's see. Try calling. I've almost got him. Well, maybe.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
Your show now, press 1.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now. Listen to the show.
Unmute, 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 unmute.
Don, can you hear me? Don, can you hear me? Hello? 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 Well, I don't know what's going on, folks. This is a bit awkward. Let me see if I can message him here. Sorry about this, folks. This is a bit awkward. I don't really know what to do. Trying to get Don back connected. His Let's see. Let's see. He should be connecting any second now. Hang on, let me try it like this. He went away. He was on for a minute and then he went away. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can I think I figured out how to call him. Let me see if it works. Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. I can hear you as well. So if you just want to continue like this, I think it'll work.
Okay. Yeah, it kicked me off, and it wouldn't even bring up a keypad on my screen at all, and it wasn't letting me hit the quick connect. It wasn't allowing me to do anything. So I felt like the only thing I could do was to reboot.
I got you. Well, I've got you here on. I went ahead and just logged in, and because I figured out I could call you from it, and so I just logged into the account to give you a call. So if you want to take us away in Deuteronomy 32, I guess this will work.
All right, that sounds good. Well, folks, I I apologize for the problem, the technical difficulty that happens every once in a while, unfortunately, here on Blog Talk. And so we have to do the best that we can. Normally, William is in charge of the technology to get us up and going and restarted and rebooted and what have you. It's really, really, really good to have Daniel that can do that kind of thing as well. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we started on Deuteronomy chapter 32, and we stated how incredibly important this chapter, which is called the Song of Moses, how important it is to the number one, to the entirety of Scripture. I mean, the song is echoed over and over and over and over in Old Testament prophecies. And what's amazing to me is the song, pardon me, sneeze attack, allergies are terrible. What's amazing to me is that the song is cited in many Old Testament prophecies of the last days, many Old Testament prophecies of the last days, day of the Lord, of the judgment, the resurrection. For instance, in Isaiah 24 through 27, the Song of Moses is cited almost verbatim in chapter 27. And so the pervasiveness of the use of the Song of Moses in the prophetic corpus is very, very powerful. And the application that the Old Testament prophets made of the song when they were predicting the last days events is so powerful. And then when you come to the New Testament and you find Jesus saying that the time for the fulfillment of what the Old Testament prophets had said had arrived, Matthew chapter 13, verse 17, when he says, many prophets and wise men have desired to look into the things which you see and have not seen them, to hear the things that you hear and have not heard them, the things which the angels have desired to look into. And so Jesus made it very, very clear that the time of fulfillment had arrived, and guiding his entire ministry, as numerous scholars have pointed out, guiding Jesus' entire ministry was, number one, the book of Deuteronomy, but more specifically, the Song of Moses. I called attention a couple of weeks ago to the very first article that I ever read by a scholar by the name of David Mosner, in which he delineated and explained and just did an absolutely incredible job of blowing my mind, for sure, about the pervasiveness and the importance of the Song of Moses in the life and the ministry of Jesus, as well as the rest of the New Testament writers. There are several New Testament scholars, one of them P.N.D. Walker, Richard Hayes, N.T. Wright. They're just a host of modern-day scholars who recognize the importance of the Song of Moses for the New Testament writers, and particularly the eschatological application that the New Testament writers make of the Song of Moses. So we went across a lot of that 2 weeks ago. And I know that Daniel had told me he wasn't going to cover Deuteronomy chapter 32 in last week's program, and filling in for me as well. So he's playing double duty. He's filling in for William, filling in for me as well. But what I thought we'd do tonight is to examine the fact that Deuteronomy chapter 32 presents for us, for lack of better terminology, what I call projection. And when I talk about projection, in the overall story of the message of the Song of Moses, it's not only the projection to the time of the last days, but it's also projected imminence. And what I mean by that is that in Deuteronomy 32, 35 and following, the Lord says, in due time their foot shall slip. The time of their judgment draws nigh. Well, many people try to use that passage to negate time statements, because they say, well, look, here is Moses writing almost 1,500 years before the time of Jesus, and yet the New Testament writers are quoting the Song of Moses, saying it was about to be fulfilled, but Moses said it was at hand, and it was 1,500 years until the first century. Therefore, at hand, shortly, quickly, etc., cannot be taken in a prosaic, literalistic kind of way. Well, as I have pointed out in my book, Who's This Babylon, as well as in my book, Can God Tell Time? Both of those books are available on my websites. But as I point out, we have in the Old Testament numerous examples, and the Song of Moses is certainly one of them. We have examples of what, for lack of better terminology, can be called projection. And again, what I mean by that is that the writer lets us know, the speaker lets us know, that he's not talking about his own day, that he is talking about a time far removed from his day. And we find this, by the way, in other passages in Deuteronomy. Let me share one of those passages with you before we actually get into the Song of Moses. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 4 is sometimes called the roadmap of the future by the dispensational writers. They appeal to Deuteronomy chapter 4 to outline their scheme of eschatology. Unfortunately, they really, really do a bad job of proper exegesis and exercising proper hermeneutic. But in Deuteronomy chapter 4, which in some ways is an echo or a prelude even to the Song of Moses, Moses is speaking. And he says so much of the very things that he does in Deuteronomy chapter 31, as well as Deuteronomy 32. But in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 23 and following, I'm just going to read it. And I hope that you will follow along with the thought here as we talk about projection. Moses told Israel, "Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of anything which the Lord your God has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God." Now notice what he says. When you beget children and grandchildren, and you have grown old in the land, and you act corruptly, and make a carved image in the form of anything, and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him into anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that you will soon utterly perish from the land when you cross over the Jordan to possess. You will not prolong your days in it, but you will be utterly destroyed. And then he continues with a promise of restoration if they will repent and turn back to the Lord. Now, notice what he says. And by the way, some years ago, one of the very first times that I read this passage being used by someone to negate the time statements, it was in an article by Wayne Jackson. Wayne Jackson is a longtime minister in the Churches of Christ out of Stockton, California. For years, he was an outspoken critic of covenant eschatology. Wayne's health had begun to fail him some years ago. Wayne has not been nearly as active or outspoken, and justifiably so, obviously, with bad health. I always considered Wayne a really nice guy, except when he was writing against covenant eschatology, and he could get downright mean at those times. But he wrote a series of articles on the elastic nature of prophetic time. And he made the comment that prophetic time statements of at hand, quickly, shortly, near, soon, etc., are not to be taken in any kind of a literalistic manner, because they are simply, statements that affirm certainty, or they affirm anything, evidently, according to Wayne Jackson. They affirm anything except objective imminence of the events under consideration. And so he says that we must realize that prophetic time statements are, his term, elastic. When you break down what he actually meant, what he meant to say was prophetic time statements are silly putty. They can be stretched into anything whatsoever. But he appealed to Deuteronomy chapter 4. And he said, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that you will soon utterly perish from the land. And he all he did was quote verse 26. He didn't read the previous verses. And I have to tell you, folks, I was deeply, deeply troubled when I read that article by Wayne Jackson, because I had always considered him a man of integrity. I had always considered him a good Bible student, a Bible scholar. And here he was lifting a passage completely and totally out of its context, ignoring the preliminary verses that set the context of the very verse he was appealing to, and literally doing nothing but proof texting. See, what we have here is the Lord saying, you will soon perish out of the land. But Israel didn't perish out of the land. You know, the 10 northern tribes did not perish out of the land for 700 years. The 2 southern tribes did not perish out of the land for another 230 years. So see, here you have a period of time, my goodness, almost 1,000 years be for fulfillment. And by the way, AD 70 didn't take place for 800 years. And again, I was literally stunned about how bad the argument was and is. And by the way, several other writers picked up on Wayne's argument and used it as well. So I wrote a series of articles entitled, "Is Prophetic Time Elastic?" And you can find some of those articles on my website, donkpreston.com. But I mentioned the concept of projection. And by that I mean the writer actually says, lets us know, number one, he's not talking about his day. Number two, he is talking about a time far removed from his day. And number three, he is talking about events that when that far off day arrives, then certain events will be at hand. They will come shortly and soon and quickly. Notice again, verse 28. When you beget children and grandchildren, and you have grown old in the land, but then when you act corruptly, commit idolatry, then when? Well, a long time down the road, after you've been in the land, a long time. Then, when you commit idolatry, then you will perish quickly off of the land. Daniel, have you heard or read individuals trying to use these passages to negate the time statements?
Well, specifically the one that you mentioned, it was in Wayne Jackson's article entitled, I think it was "The Menace of Radical Preterism." And
yes, that's correct.
And I had to respond. I responded to it on my website, just as I saw that you did on yours, and basically said the same thing. It's not talking about them. It's talking about their children's children. It's a future generation. And the solution to this, of course, is found in the statements of Jesus that we looked at last week, where he said, Paul said in Philippians and Peter said in Acts, that they were that adulterous and perverse generation prophesied about in Deuteronomy 32, which means what they were saying then is that the at-hand statement in Deuteronomy 32 applied to their day and their time.
Yeah. And, it's really disappointing when you realize that men that you had held in such high esteem as being scholars and great Bible students, and then when you see from their own pen, from their own articles, you see just overt deception being attempted. Did Wayne Jackson believe that did he trust that his readers were not going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 4 and read verse 25?
Well, the biggest... Sorry about that. I was going to say the biggest trouble
Go ahead.
I was going to say the biggest trouble with all of this, Don, is the very thing that sort of made me realize that preterism might not be as ridiculous as I originally thought. And that was how, I don't know if this was true with you, but I know it was true for me. When dealing with premillennials, it is hammered down our throats that at hand means at hand. And to emphasize that at hand means at hand, as in the statement, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, we would go to Mark 9:1 and say, look at there, the kingdom would come before those would taste death. And so if an author says that something's at hand, they expected it to take place within their lifetime. And of course, I'd go to Revelation and see that and say, oh, well, I guess Revelation would take place within their lifetime. And I go to James 5, the coming of the Lord is at hand. Well, I guess the coming of the Lord would take place within their lifetime. And when we're talking to premillennials, Wayne Jackson, I'm sure, would have been more than happy to go to Matthew 3 and talk about the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and at hand means at hand, and do we even trust what John said, and can we believe what he said at all? But whenever dealing with covenant eschatology, Now they just as just as they tried their very best to emphasize what at hand means and dealing with the kingdom of God, they put in just as much effort, if not more, to discount those statements of imminence in relation to the second coming of Jesus Christ.
That is, pardon me, the point that you made is one that I have made repeatedly on more occasions than I can even begin to count. And by the way, since we mentioned Wayne Jackson, some years ago, many years ago now, he wrote a little small pamphlet entitled Dispensationalism, A System of Infidelity. And in that pamphlet, commenting on Matthew chapter 3, verse 2, in which John said, the kingdom of heaven has drawn near. Wayne Jackson said, John said the kingdom of heaven had drawn near. There is simply no way to stretch that time statement into 2,000 years without destroying the meaning of language. And yet that same author is the one that says time statements do not mean anything. And I will remember this. Guy N. Woods, a man that I know that you're too young to remember, but in my upbringing as a young man, Guy N. Woods was just considered the ultimate scholar in the churches of Christ. He was a man trained in logic, a man trained in law, a man trained in evidence. And I used to just sit in awe of Guy N. Woods when I would go hear him speak. And I was privileged to hear him debate on one occasion. I've forgotten now who he was debating. But, I was always just blown away by Guy N. Woods' incredible grasp of logic, especially. He was a man that loved to formulate logical arguments and was so adept at it. Well, in his commentary on Matthew, he does a fantastic job of pointing out that the meaning of at hand cannot mean 2,000 years. It is an abuse of language to try to make 2,000 years slip into at hand or has drawn near. It is a violation of the Word of God. Well, then, that same man that I admired so much wrote a commentary on the book of James. And James said, the coming of the Lord, the parousia, has drawn near. Same Greek tense, same Greek word as used by John to speak of the kingdom in Matthew 3:2. Same word being used now in James chapter 5, 6-8.
90
in the same
seconds.
Greek tense. And Guy N. Woods, in his commentary on the book of James, says, some have imagined that James was saying that the coming of the Lord had drawn near, but that is obviously false because he has not come. All that James was attempting to convey was that the coming of the Lord was so certain to come that it could
60
be spoken
seconds.
of as being at hand. And listen, I did that comparative study between Guy N. Woods on Matthew 3 and Guy N. Woods on James chapter 5 in the late 70s. I was shaken, to be honest about it. How anybody so eminently logical, so profoundly scholarly, or so I thought, could be so incredibly inconsistent.
Now, what's interesting,
And it made my head turn around on my shoulders.
just real
I
quick,
was incredibly disappointed in Guy N. Woods. Go ahead.
let me
10 seconds.
Well, I don't have time. I'll have to do it next week because we only have 10
Okay.
seconds left before
Yeah,
it cuts off.
Yeah, we are actually out of time, folks. Thank you for joining us here on Two Guys and a Bible, here on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. Daniel, thank you for your help with the technology. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say good night. God bless.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
Call Don Preston. Let's see. We'll see y'all later.